Locock, for those sobering facts and calls for action and what we can do to help. Esther, your organization has been responding to the needs identified at the community levels. We welcome your statement about what you are seeing on the ground. Esther.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Security Council for inviting me today to this important meeting on Cameroon. I am Jomo Esther Omam, the Executive Director of Reach Out, a locally based organization, civil society organization, whose headquarters is in the southwest region of Cameroon. Equally, I am the General Coordinator for the Southwest and Northwest Women's Task Force. It pleases me to sit before you this day, not only as the Executive Director of Reach Out, nor the General Coordinator of the Southwest and Northwest Women's Task Force, but as a woman, a mother, a wife, a daughter, and a sister who would like to give a human face to the ongoing crisis in the two regions today. I am here to talk on behalf of those women, mothers, wives, sisters, and daughters who have lost it all to this crisis. Those who are trapped in the bushes, in the forest, because they lost everything which they could hold on to. I am here today thinking about those women who are living in uncompleted buildings in other regions, other than where they were living. I am here today talking on behalf of those women who are today called refugees or internally displaced, who live in host communities, those who live in motor parks, those who live in petrol stations, those whose children are not going to school, those girls and women who are sexually abused, and the boys who have adopted negative coping attitudes. I am equally here today to talk on behalf of the Southwest and Northwest Women's Task Force, whose aim is to significantly contribute in ending this crisis. I am here for those women who for the past 1 year have been carrying this symbol of orange, which stands for non-violence, meaning that women, mothers, wives, sisters, and daughters, we are for non-violence. I'll be talking about the humanitarian issues in the ongoing conflict and make a call to action. I will say that I'm giving a human face to the crisis in the Northwest and Southwest regions, which has greatly affected both regions for the past 3 years. Our communities, swept up in conflict, have left hundreds of deaths, suffering masses, and over 1 million in need of life-saving assistance. The situation is becoming increasingly desperate, with no one spared from the violence and trauma, which is spiraling out of control. The violence has uprooted over 500,000 people from their homes and forced over 40,000 people to seek refuge in neighboring Nigeria. Displacement, which is already very high, continues to have serious consequences on the livelihoods and living conditions of the affected populations. Many of the conflict-affected people, especially women, are growing more vulnerable as the violence persists. A violence which has been present in both regions for the past 3 years and humanitarian assistance remains inadequate and still far from covering all humanitarian needs. The vulnerability has been further compounded by the lack of access to farmlands and markets, the deterioration in medical and water facilities, the lack of shelter and civil status documents. Many healthcare services as well as health structures and medical staff have come under attack. In most areas within the conflict zones, health facilities are non-functional or have been burnt with medical staff who have fled fearing for their lives. Education has also been significantly impacted with very limited access. Presently, less than 15 to 20% of children go to school. The majority of the displaced are women and children who, ironically, are the base of the society who need protection at all times. It is estimated that over 3,000 children are suffering from severe acute malnutrition and require urgent treatment. Regrettably, more than 40% of clinics and health centers no longer provide vaccination, antenatal clinics, antiretroviral treatments, and less than 15% of births are assisted by skilled attendants. In this regard, we wish to say that the violent situation prevailing in the Northwest and Southwest regions is now an incubator of human rights violations and abuses, a source of pain and misery. We have a woman who just died 3 days ago before I could embark on my journey to this place, a pregnant woman who got into labor, and the labor got complicated. And the population, the neighbors, were afraid to take her to the nearby health center because that is a day nobody was supposed to go out. The neighbors called for civil society organizations who are involved into humanitarian assistance. They tried all their best to secure access to no avail. They looked for motorbikes to transport the lady, and these refused for fear of being shot. Till late in the night, and in the early hours of the next day, this woman died with the baby in her womb. Our children suffer or die every day, and we cannot sit and be indifferent amidst such chaos without talking, and more importantly, without acting. Why will you ask me, a mother, a woman, a wife, a daughter, a sister, not to talk about what I see every day going on in our communities? Why won't I talk about what is happening to our children, to ourselves? Most of our children, in order to cope in these deteriorating conditions, have tried to survive and are now using negative coping mechanisms such as stealing, juvenile delinquency, prostitution, or becoming drug addicts. STIs, HIV and AIDS are on the rise among the youth population as a result of rape and early forced marriages. The rate of teenage pregnancies, early motherhood, and trafficking in persons have increased due to the hardship people experience. It is paramount on all stakeholders to establish respect, dignity, and prosperity for our children and the next generations. Access to these displaced persons for any sort of humanitarian intervention can vary depending on whom the specific actors are. If today you are not known in the community becomes suspicious, and it is difficult for you to get into that community to provide whatsoever support or aid you have for them. Women, especially civil society leaders, for example, have ways of making inroads into these conflict-ridden communities. This is because the women are mothers, wives, sisters, and givers of life, and they do care about children's welfare. For this reason, we are calling on all international organizations, the UN, and others who are concerned with humanitarian response to work closely with national organizations that have access and acceptance from the communities. This is because there is a mutual understanding and trust among the communities and the national organizations. When it comes to reach out, for example, we had previously covered all the 6 divisions of the Southwest region for other programs before this crisis. And SNOT, which stands for Southwest and Northwest Women's Task Force, has a representation in all 13 divisions that make up the Northwest and Southwest region. This access is possible because most of our women-led organizations are spread within 13 divisions. Inasmuch as this is done, national organizations and civil society need technical support, guidance and capacity building from the international humanitarian community to make sure that the response is more effective, timely, and acceptable and of acceptable quality following humanitarian principles. Investment in local capacity will also help to ensure sustainability of the response and greater accountability towards affected communities. While international humanitarian presence was strengthened last year, and despite our combined efforts, we believe that only a few, less than 10%, reach out source of the affected population has received assistance so far because the resources are limited and access to some areas remain problematic. Given the fact that many dialogue alternatives with no concrete follow-up have been initiated locally and each party still maintains their position, there is an urgent need for both parties to come together and start talking. If not, the possibility of an immediate end of hostility will still be elusive. This will imply continued violence and hostility within the communities, and thereby continued massive population displacement and humanitarian needs. Thus, we suggest the following. First, 3 years after the beginning of the crisis, the UN and its partners should urgently step up humanitarian aid because what is given is far below expectation than what is required. Meanwhile, we do not know why very little attention is paid to this crisis in the Northwest and Southwest when it comes to humanitarian aid. We therefore call on all humanitarian actors to step up their engagement in humanitarian efforts. Secondly, reach out and SNOT think that there should be more effective presence and regular field visits, not just in Buea and Bamenda, the capital cities of the 2 regions, but in the deep field where the needs are direst. By so doing, they will have more accurate data from the victims or those affected from within the communities about their conditions and needs. This will enable a more tailored assistance and greater accountability to the affected population. Thirdly, we encourage stronger partnership between international humanitarian partners and national organizations to expand humanitarian access and go a step further in the localization of humanitarian assistance. Fourthly, the UN and other international actors can encourage and offer different services to protect and address humanitarian needs. They can offer, for example, home shelter programs by putting in place temporary homes for the victims and affected populations. They can also institute legal counseling and referral systems and have a field presence to step up confidence among the population. Finally, and beyond humanitarian programming, the UN could support greater efforts to encourage talks and dialogue between the conflicting parties who are brothers, for an eventual end to the crisis, for them to come up with a roadmap to achieving sustainable peace that builds more on our existing strength and influence. I earlier said that I had been a victim 3 times. 2 times, I was attacked in my home at gunpoint. The first time, I was thrown on the floor and a knock hit my head, which caused me getting low cuts since then because I developed health issues. Still, I kept my morale high because I had many who were looking on to me for provision of care and support. The second time, in my own very house, all of my family was held hostage for 3 hours, for I don't know why. And my grandson, the first grandson, was being taken away from me when I was giving him medication because he was very sick after his first anniversary. And he was being tossed up and down like a ball and threatened to be taken away from me when the mother was not even in the region. And I asked the people in front of me, my son, what did I do wrong that I should get this from you? I died that day. I died that day as a mother, as a grandmother. But I resurrected with the determination to forge ahead in my activism to see that I carry on the crusade for peace, because I could put myself in the shoes of all those women and girls who have gone through the pains and suffering which I just witnessed in a very short period of time. The third time, my 2 children on the 20th of April were kidnapped. And again, I kept cool the first day, the second day. I put on the face of a CEO and a general coordinator. In the night of the second day, I could not bear it anymore. The mother in me resurrected, and I passed out. Thanks to an adopted doctor of mine, I was brought back to life. And I'm here today to speak on behalf of all those women who have gone through these ordeals, through the pains and sufferings. And I'm here today to talk about that little girl who is called Mariana, whose mother and siblings were shot. And the father had to flee, had to run into the bushes, into the forest. And she was left alone in the care of her paternal aunt. And because the paternal aunt had a son who is dropped out from school because schools are not going on, and this child was not also going to school, a 12-year-old girl, she was sexually abused by this boy and got pregnant. And when the aunt discovered this, she was thrown away from that house, sent to the unknown. And our members got this information and brought the report to us. And we as mothers, as women, were heartbroken and we started looking for this girl. What about Mama Joanna, who told us in one of our distribution sites where we are distributing food in collaboration, in partnership with WFP, who told us that she had to trek for 2 to 3 hours in order to get to us for food, that she passed so many corpses. As she was coming in the forest path, and other women saw and got frightened and went back. What about Mr. John, who left one of the villages and had to trek 20 kilometers in order to get to one of the distribution sites? What about all these people who are going through pain and suffering? We think that it is time for us to start silencing the guns. We think that it is time for us to start talking Let us begin to talk. Let us start talking genuinely. Let us start having inclusive dialogue. Let us sit face to face, facing each other, discussing the issues, and identifying common grounds, and looking for the way forward. That way forward, that will lead us to sustainable, peaceful solutions. We want to regain the peace which we formerly enjoyed before this crisis. Thank you for your kind attention.
Esther, thank you very much for your personal and passionate account and the serious impact on women and children in the